Some years ago, I was out with a friend shopping for clothes. I saw this light pink shirt with the word feminist on it. My friend and I both really liked the shirt, so I decided to buy it. I didn't think about any situation at that time that would cause me to regret buying it. I knew the definition of the word. However, I did not stop to think about the different connotations it has received for decades across varying demographics. Me and that same friend later in the month went to a party to see some of her friends from her old high school. Her friends were very kind, fun, and welcoming. I was glad my friends introduced me to them. Later in the night, we began playing a card game. Some rounds in, it began to get very heated and competitive. Getting ready for the next round, I began removing my denim jacket, which revealed my new shirt. You know how saying the wrong word in a conversation can cause it to immediately come to an end? Rhetoric is capable of doing that, and much more. My t-shirt can be classified as rhetoric, and the responses it receives are byproducts of it. As the responses it received, they were all diverse. Some people just glanced at the t-shirt and didn't seem to be bothered. Others had a concern and seemed uncomfortable. Many of them were guys. Two girls actually pointed out and stated their thoughts. The first person stated, "I don't understand how girls think they can complain about society when everyone is allowed to do what they want. Women shouldn't be complaining or spreading false information. The world is in a better place than it was 300 years ago." The second girl added, "Why is it that feminists are seen as man haters who are weirdos that think it's okay not to shave?" I was taken by surprise and just displayed a look of concern to those comments. At the end, I just laughed it off and said we had different definitions of the word feminist. It was difficult not to respond and disprove their ideas, but thinking about the responses I would receive made me feel more uncomfortable and worried. I went home and, like anyone else being accused of being a man hater, I Googled the definition of feminism to see if it somehow had changed. It didn't. As you can see, the definition is far from what those individuals stated it was. I and a majority of people do not see a problem or threat with the bottom three sentences under this word. Okay, so what did I do wrong? What changed? What occurred was beyond my control. It wasn't me who did wrong. It was actually several others before us. This is a reminder to remember our history as it always follows us, since it has shaped our world as we know it. Historical artifacts such as feminist speeches are rhetoric of the past that have been molded and altered throughout history in response to an ever-changing society. But I am not here to place blame on society. Instead, I am here to create change. We as a society of men and women today have the ability to change the public sentiment on the word feminism. As it was done before, however, to eliminate the contentious nature of the word and receive the full benefits of the movement. To create this change, it's important to first understand the past rhetorical changes in feminist speeches, which can be evidently seen as all pieces of rhetoric have distinguishable elements. The discussion and controversy of feminism can be traced back to 1848 with Elizabeth Cady Stanton's Declaration of Sentiments. Stanton was unlike most other girls during her time by being born to a father who was a lawyer. From a young age Stanton challenged social norms as her parents enrolled her in a prestigious seminary institution in New York, and she later studied law with her father. Upon marriage and having children, Stanton grew tired and discontent from her daily life of being a housewife. As a result, Stanton and friends of hers organized the Seneca Falls Convention to advocate for equal rights among men and women, especially regarding the right to vote. Stanton's motivation to organize the Seneca Falls Convention served as the exigence for her famous Declaration of Sentiments. Now, keep in mind that in 1848, women had absolutely no voice. They had no legal representation. They could not own land. They couldn't even vote. Stanton displayed this frustration by saying in her speech, "He has endeavored in every way that he could to destroy her confidence in her own powers, to lessen her self-respect, and to make her willing to lead a dependent and abject life. Therefore, Stanton was incredibly constrained by society and what she told the audience. Consequently, she was judged negatively by the media and others, as feminist views and opinions were highly unheard of at the time. However, this never stopped her and others' efforts to advance women's rights, as several women and men generations later would also continue the fight. Decades later in 1920, changes began to occur in the rhetoric of feminists. The passing of 72 years and a world war is the cause and exigence for this change. Since 1848, the audience has grown as women's suffrage and feminism gained more attention. The audience was also different in that they witnessed one of the most tragic, devastating wars in history. The First World War impacted the world greatly, especially the world of American women. Over 9 million women mobilized themselves alongside millions of men. This patriotic action of these women proved women were also citizens of this country that contributed and also suffered through this traumatic time. This was a defining moment in history, as the destruction and grief of the war was never experienced before, and it placed a spotlight on battling global tyranny and injustice. However, many Americans, including Helen Keller, question America's effort to fight for liberty overseas, while half of its citizens were unable to gain full citizenry rights, such as to vote for the government that joined this bloody, tragic, and destructive war. Keller highlights this injustice in her 1920 speech by stating, "And even if we all vote together, we cannot abuse this right more than the men have done by themselves. And without this power, women do not happen to have a natural protector and are at mercy of man-made laws, and experience shows that these laws are often unjust to them." Here, Keller displays disappointment as she feels women have been abused and restricted for all their lives with no way out. Therefore, she advocates for women to gain equal rights and voting powers to end the injustice. Therefore, the game changed. During World War I, women, despite persistent inequality, rose up to action and sacrificed their lives and future for their nation. Women did the contrary to what they normally did, as according to Keller, women are not isolated beings, puppets in the world to be manipulated by men. This movement heavily changed the constraints feminist rhetoric experienced, since by 1918, 15 states have already given women voting rights. During the war, suffragists constantly pressured President Wilson to support a federal amendment to enable women to vote, as they too represented the country. Finally, in 1918, the president stated, "We have made partners of the women in this war. Shall we admit them only to a partnership of suffering and sacrifice and toil, and not to a partnership of privilege?" This statement introduced a women's suffrage amendment into the agenda of Congress and motivated Keller's speech, as by 1920, the 19th Amendment was in the process of being accepted by Congress. Although women gained the liberty to cast a ballot, women still face a disproportionate amount of inequality. As a result, in 1995, the UN formed the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. First Lady Hillary Clinton was invited to speak on the issue, although there was tensions between America and China during that time. Therefore, Clinton was constrained due to political reasons, as China was widely known to have a terrible human rights reputation. It was China's desire to host this conference to conceal their terrible human rights record. Therefore, Clinton unmasked their lies and put China on the spot. Clinton voiced her assertions bluntly without hesitation and provoked even more tension between the two countries, despite others' desire for her to soften her remarks. Although Clinton was told not to name China or other countries that allowed the maltreatment of women, she instead specifically named the terrible things that were being done to women in those countries without naming them. This was enough for the public to know what countries were being accused, and it truly surprised the world, as no other person besides Hillary Clinton could have blasted China like that on their own soil. In 1995, China was well known for their single-child policy, forced abortion, sterilization, bride burning, and other heinous acts against women. So much so, when I was looking for real cases of these acts, I came across a 1995 report from Amnesty International, an organization focused on human rights that was over 30 pages long, detailing the documented acts of inhumane treatment of women in China. This report was incredibly saddening. Therefore, according to PBS, Clinton's speech was an impassioned appeal for human rights, as she used emotionally arousing statements such as, "It is a violation of human rights when babies are denied food or drowned or suffocated or their spines broken simply because they are born girls." Clinton's objective was for governments to recognize universal human rights as women's rights and empower women in order to strengthen families and inevitably nations. Keller, Stanton, and Clinton were not afraid to speak their minds. Therefore, advocates for gender inequality should not be afraid either. Feminists need to be free from fear, judgment, and prejudice they experience when advocating for their purpose, as it weakens the movement necessary for families and nations to flourish. Feminism benefits everyone. Recent data from the WHO reports that in more gender equal countries, men are half as less likely to be depressed and less likely to suicide. Men also report having higher life satisfaction in these countries and sleeping better. Clinton asserted, "Every woman, every man, every child, every family, and every nation on our planet has a stake in the discussion, as the world cannot flourish if women are unhealthy, uneducated, beaten, unemployed, and dependent on their oppressors. Women need to take control over their own destinies." We need to work together as humans for women to be able to achieve this. To create this change, we must redefine feminism. Feminism is not a noun, it is a verb. It is advocating, it is marching, it is respecting women, it is validating women as individuals worthy of opportunities, it is equally paying women for equal work. It is allowing women to make their own choices. It is showing compassion towards gender inequality. It is making the world a better place for women and all their loved ones. Rhetoric is a powerful and persuasive thing we all have the capability of creating. Therefore, if we desire change, it is up to us to create the rhetoric that will transform the meaning of feminism to one that is less problematic and more accurate. Actions speak louder than words. They always have. Words can be misleading. However, the purpose behind our actions are unmistakable. Therefore, we must educate ourselves and our future generations. We must motivate young women and girls to advocate for themselves and teach young men and boys to respect and support women. We must share women's struggles and stories because, like I said before, our history is important and should never be forgotten. Without this enlightenment, no change can occur. Therefore, I urge you, no matter your gender, to advocate for the women in your life. Allow them to be competent, strong, and intelligent enough to pursue their destinies. If we don't do this, the world will continue to underestimate the power feminism can have on our lives and our well-being.